knows that I'm grieving. He knows that I'm going through this loss still. But all he does is he just shows up every once in a while with a hamburger or pizza, and he just sits here. He is truly Job's comforter who doesn't say a word. And that's
pizza goes a long way, I'll tell you.
Just show up and bring food.
Live your life with purpose, change someone's life for the better, and leave a lasting impact on those around you. Welcome to Finish Strong, the podcast designed to help you discover your unique purpose and develop a plan to leave a powerful legacy. Dan, Brian, and Terry are ready, so let's get started.
Maybe you've experienced the loss of someone you loved very dearly. If so, you know how overwhelming grief is and how difficult it is to walk through this journey to the other side. I've traveled it with my late wife, Beth, as she battled stage 4 cancer and passed into heaven 6.5 years ago. But I faced it again recently because just 6 months ago, my sister, Ronn Read, passed unexpectedly from a stroke. Maybe you're walking that journey right now, or you know someone who is. We're all going to face it at some point in our life. And in this edition of Finish Strong, we want to offer you hope and encouragement. Terry and Brian are here today, and then we've got a very special guest I'm going to introduce. But guys, Terry and Brian, grief hits everybody sooner or later.
It surely does. It surely does. And I've been fortunate enough to not have anyone in my immediate family pass away, but we grieve for different things. I will never forget how hard I cried when my mother passed a number of years ago. That cold February day in Iowa. I don't know if I had cried more ever before or after, but it was overwhelming.
Yeah, when my dad passed, it was right after I graduated, just a month after, 2 months after, and it was quick. It was so quick because he had been strong. But it happened fast, and something that we had to deal with at the time, but we did, and we all face it. And it was just something that we really depended on the Lord and the Holy Spirit to get us through.
Well, I mentioned my sister passed away just 6 months ago, and we are honored to have Reverend Ronn Read, who was actually married to my sister for 48 years. And he's not only my brother-in-law, he's a great friend, and he's someone I admire so much. Ron grew up in Kansas. He attended John Brown University on a baseball scholarship. Terry, you remember John Brown? We had a fight break out.
We got to play him. They killed us, but we did get to play him.
They beat us pretty bad. He later went to Kansas State. He accepted Christ through Campus Crusade Ministries. He also played and coached baseball at Liberty University, where he received his Master of Divinity degree. By the way, guys, I told him to send me a brief bio, and this is it, brief.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, we're just about out of time.
Yeah. But he went on to start a church in Quincy, Illinois, where he married Beth and I. He performed the ceremony. He received his doctorate in family and marriage counseling while there. He went on to pastor in Milwaukee, Tacoma, Washington, Lake Zurich, and he and my sister got married in 1973. They had 5 children, and get this, 17 grandchildren.
Oh, my gosh.
Wow.
Ron, you've left quite a legacy. Thanks so much for being with us. I know just 6 months ago, but I know you, and I know you'll get through this.
Yeah, exactly 6 months ago yesterday is when Janie had the stroke.
Wow.
Walk us through that week, Ron, because it happened so really suddenly and unexpectedly.
Yeah, when you told me you were going to ask that, I thought, well, sure, I can get through that. Yeah. So I came home from, I do a lot of speaking with Man in the Mirror. I'm on the road just about every weekend, about 40 weekends of the year I'm speaking. And I had been gone. I came home to Janie not doing well. And your other sister, Margie, was here giving her some insulin, trying to work with her. We called the ambulance. We ended up in an emergency room the next morning. And then she had the stroke on Tuesday morning, 6 months ago. And so they took her by ambulance down to Jacksonville to Baptist Hospital. And we knew we thought she was going to have surgery to relieve the pressure. And we knew as soon as I walked in that was not going to be the case. They said she was too far gone. The stroke had damaged far too much of her brain. There was nothing they could do. And so they kind of prepared us that she wasn't going to survive. But we had hope. We kept praying. All of my kids were able to come in and spend some time with her, and we had a week before she passed. She was actually gone about the third day. She was just not there anymore. But you always hope for that last word, and she was able to actually write. We couldn't read most of what she was writing. It was just scribbles. She knew what she was writing, apparently, but we'd try to follow along and try to figure out what she had written. And we did figure out one thing. She very clearly wrote ale, that she wanted ale. And I said, "Want beer? Janie never touched a beer." Like, what? And the nurse that was standing there said, "I think the word right before that is ginger." And she let us know she wanted ginger ale. And well, she couldn't have that. But then you hope for the last words out of your spouse, especially, would be, "I love you. Thank you for 48 years." Her last words were, "Ask when I can have coffee." Coffee.
Yeah.
Through those things, even though we knew she wasn't going to make it, we were able to laugh with her, and just have such joy, even in the midst of the sorrow.
Sure.
To know that where she was going, to know she was with Jesus, and just it was a hard week. I got to tell you that there was one time I gotta say this. You always hear people say, "I felt your prayers." I got to be honest. I've never felt anybody's prayers. I never felt that. But there was one. It was actually the first night. It was Tuesday night. She'd had the stroke in the morning, and I'm kneeling down by her bed, and I'm holding her hand, and I'm the kind of guy, Dan, that you throw something at me, all right, we can fix this, we can get through this, and but I was kneeling down there, and I just said, "God, I can't do this. I don't know what to do." And it was literally like a hand in the middle of my back pushed me up. And I know that was the prayers of all the people who were just supporting us, pushed me. And it was very clear, we got this. We got this.
Amen.
Amazing.
So at that point, what it was going to end up being, we got. But God gave grace, and we said farewell to her on October the 19th, and of this past year. And it's been 6 months, and it seems like forever ago, and it seems like it was yesterday.
Yeah, I'm going to just back up and let you recoup just a little bit. You mentioned Man in the Mirror, and I wanted to mention that you are now the National Field Chaplain for Man in the Mirror, and you've held other titles with it. And how long have you been with Man in the Mirror?
Exactly 10 years. Valentine's Day was my 10th anniversary of being with them. I had pastored for 35 years, and then been with them for 10. I started out as the Chicagoland area director. That was what I was hired as, and worked with churches there. That's what we do. As area director, we work with churches to help them build a more effective ministry to men. As a matter of fact, we come in and we say, we want to kill your men's ministry, because ministry is usually just the pancake breakfast once a month and the retreat. And we want to kill that, because that's only 15 to 20% of your men. We want to build a ministry to every man in your church. Identify who they are, what chair they sit in. In other words, what type of man are they? And then how do you reach them? So that was my role in Chicagoland. Yeah. Then I became the regional director, and there were only 2 of us. So I had everything that bordered the Mississippi River and west.
Okay, we're going to tell people how they can support you in your work, because I know you raise your support near the end of the program. Okay. But let's go back. You were there with me and walked me through when Beth passed, and I wouldn't have made it without you. And who would have thought that 6 years later, I'd be trying to minister to you, our whole family, and that you'd be walking that journey. That's how life is, just so unexpected.
I got to tell you, it was a lot easier walking with you through Beth than it was.
I know it's
for the one.
And you've done so many funerals, but it's a whole different ball game when it's your spouse, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. You're losing your soulmate, and it really. And actually, that's a misnomer. I didn't lose her. I know right where she's at.
Right.
Just not here with me. And so, yeah, it's when you've been married 48 years, it's, she was my life.
And, we talked about you got 17 grandchildren and 5 kids. And I remember I talked to you about what I went through, that not only are you suffering, but when you see your kids and grandkids suffering, that just rips your heart out.
That's the hardest part. Yeah. When Terry and Brian were both talking about their parents dying, I think sometimes it's harder on me to realize that my kids have lost their mom.
Yeah. Yeah. And your grandkids lost their...
I have not cried for probably 2 weeks. There. You have found that
sorry.
Gene. It is going strong right now.
But what's the definition of grief? It means you loved someone so deeply. And I got to ask you before Brian and Terry are going to jump in, have you been angry at God? Were you ever angry at God?
My granddaughter, one of my granddaughters, I have 10 of them. One of my granddaughters said, "Do you resent God for taking Mima?" And I said, "Well, God didn't take Mima. Death took Mima, and death takes everybody." I said, God actually was there through that death to give me support and to give me hope. So no, I don't resent God. And I asked her, "Do you?" And she goes, "Yes, I lost my Mima." And I said, "Well, let's talk about that." And we did. We ended up having a good talk and a good cry and a good prayer time. But I know, to be honest, the 5 stages of grief, and one of them is anger. I never experienced any anger of anything. I think the only thing I really experienced was some anger at myself. Should I have picked up on signs? Should I have seen that she wasn't doing well? Should I have called the ambulance sooner? So I went through a little bit of that, but no anger at God, no anger. I think that's largely, Dan, because my mantra for years has been, my rest is in the sovereignty of God. God's on his own. God, nothing comes to me that doesn't come through his hands first.
That's
and knowing
good.
his sovereignty. And again, here's the key: knowing that sovereignty gives me the strength, the hope, the peace. When Paul talks about the peace that passes understanding, it only comes about when you know God is sovereign, and that sovereignty is a good thing. When we say he's in control, that's not bad. That's a good thing to know that he's got this. And he had me every minute of that whole process.
Ron, you talked about that, then asked if you were angry at God. Have you gone through any other stages of grief? I know there's they say 5 stages. Have you gone through any of those, or in a sequential order?
Well, denial is the first one, and I'm on about the 7,000th round of denial. I still pick up my phone to call Janie when something happens. I still take a picture that I want to send to her. There was a manatee down at our dock today, and I wanted to just tell her, "Hey, we finally saw the manatee." And just that denial is still there. That I still believe, that's the hardest part. She's not coming back. So I have that denial. The next stage is anger, and and then there's also bargaining. Well, there was no bargaining on my account. What was I going to bargain? Even when that week that she was in the hospital, I kind of accepted from the second day on, she's not going to come back. She's not going to make it. We believed and we hoped, but I think all of us deep down knew. So there was no bargaining. Then the next one, I could never name number 4. You guys know number 4, the 4th stage of grief?
I went through them all. I can't remember them all.
Yeah, I could, even as I would tell people about the 5 stages of grief, I know the last one is acceptance, but the 4th one is depression. And I didn't go through a depression of well, I'm weeping now, but of weeping or sorrow or the blues. My depression was lack of motivation. I just couldn't get up from my chair. I sat right here for days on end. My kids would call me, "How you doing, Daddy?" And they'd see what you're seeing right now. They'd FaceTime me, and they'd say, my one son, "Are you sitting in your chair?" "Yeah." "Are you watching Fox News again?" "Yeah." They just would get, he would get so upset with me that, get up and do something.
Yeah.
And literally, guys, I could hear the chair next to me is where Janie always sat. And finally, there came a day where I heard her voice say, "Get up and do something." Now, Dan would tell you that's Mary Jane's voice all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Get up and do something.
Yeah.
And that changed it. It did become my thing. I can't just sit here and go through depression. And again, my depression was lack of motivation. I just didn't want to do anything.
Gotcha.
Well, let me ask you, Ron, that, they say that grief has a purpose, and anyone who's going through it, it may be someone who just, if it brings them closer to God, or if they begin to read their Bible more, or pray for other things. And so grief has a purpose. Do you feel like you've sensed anything that resembles a purpose or an important lesson that you might have picked up at this point?
Yeah, the number one thing, 2 Corinthians 1 says, "Blessed is the God of all comfort, who comforts us in any trouble that we're going through, any tribulation." And then there's this henna phrase, "so that." And that's so, here's what we're going through so that we can comfort others with the same comfort we receive from God. And actually down in verse 9, he says, "so that we no longer rely on ourselves, but on God." And that phrase, that "so that," has become, it's become my mantra over the last several months, is to know this happens so that this will happen. Jesus' prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane, as we celebrate, reflect on Easter, his Garden of Gethsemane prayer has several times where he says, "I pray this so that they will learn this." So the question, have I seen a purpose in this? Right now, I am on the phone with 6 widows. All 6 of them, their husbands have died since Janie died. All 6 of them were members of my first church in Quincy, Illinois, and
Wow.
they're going through this grief.
Wow.
One of them, I discipled her husband. He became a pastor. He went to Liberty and became a pastor. So she's lost not just her husband, she lost her pastor, and because they lived in the parsonage, she's losing her house. So, and another one going through struggles with her son, upset with her, literally disowning her because they didn't get a COVID shot, and his dad died, and it's your fault, and just the grief that these ladies, and I also got about 10 widowers that all of a sudden out of the woodwork, I don't know that I ever would have had a ministry with widows and widowers because I did not. Dan will tell you, I've sympathized with him when Beth died. I went through that with him, but I did not know the journey. Now I know it, and God is just opening up all sorts of avenues, all sorts of paths for me to be ministering. Man in the Mirror has actually asked me to write a new seminar. We talk about the 5 types of men, and the last man is the hurting man. They want me to write a seminar for the hurting man, the guy that needs that help.
That may be one of the strongest points we could get across to our listeners today, is that as tough as grief is, it does have a purpose, and sometimes we just have to look for it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we have to look for it. Sometimes it slaps us like a 2 before it comes.
Right.
Hey, here's a guy you need to talk to.
Ron, you mentioned some scriptures, and after Beth passed, scriptures took on new meanings to me, like, Psalm 34:18, that God is near to the brokenhearted. I felt when I got through my depression and when I was able to get out of bed and start doing things, it took me quite a while. I felt his presence. And also Isaiah 57:1, which a lot of people don't realize is even in the Bible, but it says, "The righteous perish, and no one ponders in his heart that devout men are sometimes taken away, and no one understands that the righteous are taken away to be spared from evil." So we don't know what God could have been sparing Janie from. But are there any other verses that have really meant a lot to you?
Yeah, there's a passage of scripture in Psalm that I've preached on numerous times, and all of a sudden it takes on a whole new meaning. It's Psalm 77. And in that psalm, the psalmist starts out talking about, I used to go to the temple. I used to be, to worship you. And now my soul cries out. In my distress, I cry out. And I have penciled in the margin, why only then? Why is that the only time that I cry out to God in my distress? But certainly in our distress, we cry out, just God. And he's literally saying, God, where are you? And then he goes into a series of 6 questions in Psalm 77 that I always say, I guarantee every man has asked these 6 questions in the dark night of the soul. God, have you forgotten to be merciful? Will your mercies never, have they ceased forever? Will you never return? And, and there's just that, you can hear the depth of grief in that man's voice of, where are you? But then he does something, guys, and this is critical. He starts remembering all the times God was there for him. He reflects back on the miracles, that you're the God of miracles. And he just shares that, literally, he goes to his journal and says, look at where you've been. Look at what you've done. Look at the prayers you've answered. And he says, so my hope is in you. And that psalm has just become even more precious to me than ever.
Ron, with the man in the mirror, how has your loss affected how you minister to men now?
They ministered to me recently, through the grief. Several of my guys showed up at Janie's memorial service. They came from all over the country. The waterworks are going to go again. And then they did something we have our annual reunion, and they gave me this plaque that's going to go down on Janie's bench, down on our dock. I do my dock talk every Wednesday, and they gave this awesome plaque. And, I think they did that because they just wanted to see me cry, they succeeded. But now here, the 5 months, 6 months later, I have ministered to so many of our guys, not just over death, but just over grief, loss of something. And God is definitely using that. And not just our men, my chaplain role, but, as I speak, every time I'm doing a seminar, there'll be 3 or 4 or 5 guys who they've lost their spouse. Maybe it was this year, maybe it was, 5 years ago, 10 years, doesn't matter. That box of life, and then in the middle is that ball that is grief, and on the side of that box is the pain button. The box gets bigger because life goes on, but that grief ball just keeps hitting that pain button in the strangest, weirdest ways, most unusual places. And now the grief button got punched again through this whole thing. But
Ron, 6.5 years later, I can be in a grocery store and I'll hear a song. It reminds me of Beth, and I'll just have to leave the store. I've heard this description of grief, and I think it really nails it. It's like you're walking along this very peaceful beach. The water's very calm in Hawaii, and all of a sudden a tsunami hits and just knocks you over, and that's how it is. Yeah. And I'm going to let our producer know, John, we're probably going to go a little long on this one. There's so many good things, but we're working there. Ron, I've talked to people since Janie died. I've had so many people write me that are dealing with grief and lost a spouse. And I've heard from people that said they lost them 5, 10, 15, even 20 years ago, and they still can't move on. And I tell them, your spouse wants you to move on. A counselor told me, Beth is in heaven now cheering you on. Her race is over. We've got to run. Could you say to someone who's listening now who says, I'm just stuck, I don't feel like I'll ever be productive again or do anything for the Lord again?
Well, Paul wrote to Timothy when, and Timothy's struggle was, he was battling a church, church issues in 2 Timothy. And so, I'm very thankful that Paul didn't compare his suffering to Timothy's. He didn't say, you called that suffering? I got beaten. I got through a shipwreck. No, instead, he just simply said, Timothy, endure hardship with us. That with us was, we're going through it too, so endure hardship. And that the word endure is interesting in that it's literally translated, he talks about wrestling, and this endurance is that you're going to stand firm in the faith. That's the critical part of it. Stand firm in the faith. But then he talks about hardship, and it's anything from the word is translated anything from discomfort, I don't feel good, to tribulation. So it's a pretty wide range of that hardship. But he uses 3 illustrations. And the first one is the soldier. Don't get distracted. But go back to your training. Go back to what got you here and what's your purpose for being here. Yeah, you're dodging the bullets and the bombs, but you endure and don't get distracted. Focus on what's the goal. Then he talks about the athlete. And it's hard to compare athletes today suffering for $30 million a year, but
Right.
But he talks about obey the rules. Don't get sidelined because you gave in to the temptation of an easy way out. And I see a lot of people going through grief that they want to, I want to get out of it. I just want to feel good again. And I think C.S. Lewis said, if you want to just feel good, get a bottle of whiskey and just he downplayed feeling good. No, I want to do the right thing. And the athlete wants to win the prize. The farmer has just that determination. Things that, a farmer's life, he has very little control over the weather, over the bugs, over all the different things that are going to hit him. And that's what grief is. I don't have control over death and loss, but what do I do to endure that? Well, I have to have that determination, that dependence on God, stick with this. So all three of them, Paul didn't really unpack them. He just said, you got to look at these and understand your training, your mentoring, your coaching all come into play to fulfill the goal of why you got into this in the first place.
We've just got a few minutes left, and I know Terry and Brian each have one more question, then we'll wrap it up, and I want you to tell people how they can help with your ministry in Man in the Mirror. Terry, did you have another question?
Yeah, Ron, culture kind of tells us to don't let this last too long and move on with grief, but that's because everyone around is kind of uncomfortable because our friends and people, they don't know what to do and what to say.
Right.
What could you say to those people? How did you maybe interact, or what would you have to say to people that are uncomfortable around those going through grief?
Well, the main thing is what you said. Don't expect them to get over this. Don't expect them to. Hey, it's been 6 months. Haven't you moved on?
Right.
It was maybe in 48 years I will have moved on.
Right.
In 48 years I will definitely have moved on. But don't expect somebody just to get over it. You never get over it. You don't really even get through it. You just keep plodding in this journey of grief. You're always on the journey now of that loss. It is, though, important for the person who wants to comfort or wants to and just doesn't know what to say. Don't say anything. You don't need to say anything. Just be there.
Just show up.
My best supporter is a guy who he knows that I'm grieving. He knows that I'm going through this loss still. But all he does is he just shows up every once in a while with a hamburger or pizza, and he just sits here. He is truly Job's comforter who doesn't say a word. And that's
pizza goes a long way, I'll tell you.
You know what, Ron? In my book about Beth, Hurricane of Love, I say that. Just show up and bring food.
Show up.
Bring food. But just be there. They won't care, and they won't remember what you say, but they'll remember you were there.
Exactly.
Right. And Ron, you probably already answered this with the pizza, but I was going to ask you, what has helped you most on your journey of grief?
It truly is the people who just. So I'm known in my pastorates and now with Man in the Mirror for telling a story of a college sociology class that did a man on the street survey. They just simply asked the question, "How you doing?" And the number one answer given is, "Fine, I'm doing good." And that's my answer when people say, "How you doing?" My standard answer is, "I'm doing okay." But there's some people who will ask the second question, "How you really doing?" And even there, the college sociology class, the number one answer given was, "I'm tired, or I'm busy." But my answer when they ask me, "How you really doing?" For the most part, I am doing okay. But the sociology class asked the third question, "How you really doing?" And the number one answer given was, "How much time do you have?" Because now you've gone from being polite to genuinely caring. And I've got, again, a couple of people who say, "Okay, this is my third question. How you really doing?"
Yeah.
They don't let me blow smoke. They want to know, how are you really doing? What can I do to get you through today? And that's what really counts, is just having that person who says, how you really doing.
Well, Ron, you do such a great work with Man in the Mirror, and I've supported you over the years, and I want to encourage others to do that. Can you tell them how they can get involved with your ministry?
It's very, very simple. If they'd like to support, it's www.maninthemirror.org/Ronn Read. And the Ronn Read is RONNREAD. It's the Irish version of Reads. And so, it's that simple. That puts you on a page where you can read about the ministry. You can see what I'm doing. And if you'd like to support and if you'd like to know more, just email me, ronread@gmail.com. I'd love to share with anybody what we're doing, what we as a ministry do, and what I do as the National Field Staff Chaplain, but also as a national faculty teaching seminars all across the nation. I'm going to be in Alaska in May, and I'm going to be in South Carolina in 2 weeks, and literally just doing as many seminars as possible.
Okay, once again, it's www.maninthemirror.org/Ronn with 2 N's, Ronn Read, as in read a book, RONNREAD. Ron, thank you so much. I know this was tough, but you did a great job.
Sure did.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
And I hope to see you soon, because Ron is my brother-in-law and we're good friends. And I try to get up there where he is in Georgia whenever I can. And he's got to get down here soon. Guys, we need to finish strong. And sometimes that is working through grief. Any final thoughts?
My final thought would be Psalms 147:3, where it says, "He heals the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit."
Terry?
And I would leave this final scripture for anyone who's dealing with it, and that's John 16:22, that says, "Therefore you now have sorrow, but I'll see you again, and your heart will rejoice, and your joy no more will be taken from you." There's always a bigger picture if we can keep that perspective.
I love it. And here's what we have to look forward to. Here's where my sister Mary Jane is and Beth is. They're in heaven. And in Revelation 21:4, it says, "He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away."
Amen.
If you're going through it, reach out to those friends who will just be there with you, and turn to God. He's close to the brokenhearted. Thanks for joining us for this edition of Finish Strong. God bless, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Finish Strong. For more information about Finish Strong and Fearless Faith, check out their website, ffaith.org. Make sure that you rate and review this podcast to help more people accomplish their God-given purpose, so that together we can finish strong.